Welcome to the Restoring Our City podcast, where we have candid conversations on today's topics to help connect our community. And Jeswin Thomas, my co-host, is on. And, I was looking up what is the highest award anyone can ever get. Civilian award. There's a, Presidential Medal of Freedom. But there's also in the military sense, which both of us are not in the military at all. But in honor of our series on honor, I was looking at this, and the Congressional Medal of Honor is, I did not realize that there's a whole museum dedicated to this, but the Congressional Medal of Honor is something that's given to people who display acts of bravery above and beyond, like even giving your life. And I was like, for this episode, I'm like, man, this is such a great comparison to like what honor really means. And I'm just also sad that I'd never get it because I'm not in the military. And maybe that I'm not brave enough to ever get that award. But that made me think, like, what's the most honorable thing you feel like you've done in your life?
The most honorable thing I feel like I have done in my life?
Yes.
That's a great question. I don't know what it is, but I will say in terms of things I've received and felt honored for, back in the day when I used to help our church's softball team. I think one of the first years we put that up, and I was the captain, and honestly, I was just organizing. I was terrible at playing the game. But at sort of our team end of the season dinner, I got a softball that was signed by every single one of those team members. I still have it up on my shelf over here, but I was definitely honored to receive that gift, even though it wasn't the medal of
Yeah, I mean, let's compare those two. It's like I got the softball and somebody else, gave their life. Not in the same realm, but like I respect it. I respect it. It's not an easy task to organize a softball team.
Well, what's the most honorable thing you've ever done? Now you got to answer this question.
Nothing. I mean, it's completely dishonorable person. All of this is a sham. I'm just kidding. I don't know. That's a hard one. I just ask the questions. I don't think about the answers. But man, I think when my kids kind of come to me for like genuine advice, they're really silly kids and they are very sarcastic. I don't know where they get it from, but when they do genuinely come to me, it almost seems like, I don't know if it's honorable in a sense, but it is this like respect, right? It's like I depend on you. I know I need you, this kind of thing. And it's like you're the only one who can solve this. Like my son will tell me that all the time. And it just makes me think, I'm like, oh wow, I feel valuable, right? Like in his eyes. And when we think about this biblical concept of honor, one of the reasons why we're even doing this series is because it seems like there's such a lack of honor in our society today. Society is just garbage, right? There's just so much toxic stuff going on. And then we start to peel back the layers. I'm like, hey, fundamentally, what's wrong? And it might be because we just don't understand or practice this concept of honor. Jeswin, how do you feel about that? Are we just taking that too far? Or do we feel like society today is more dishonorable than ever?
Yeah, I think we, substantiated it. There's a bunch of stats that we throw out in episode 1. And just to understand the concept of what does it mean to honor, obviously the most famous thing we reference from the Bible is to honor your parents, which we just did in the last episode. But now we're sort of moving outward, right? Like, one, we define it. 2, we understand what it looks like at home. Now we're going to move a little bit further out from the home. Where does it go? And we're kind of jumping into the church. What does it look like there before we step out one layer further back and get into what does it look like in the world or even in our country? So we're sort of in the middle of this journey.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to understand, if you haven't heard our intro episode or the episodes before this about honoring your parents, that's really where it starts, right? To understand the concepts of honor. But then now we're talking about a place that it seems like Captain Obvious that we should honor our church and honor our church leadership. But easier said than done, right? And I think the reason why we wanted to bring this is because as the Bible talks about honor, as we talk about how crazy our society is, there's so many groups of people that we just need to treat better, right? And respect better and show honor to in the right way. But it's interesting how the Bible even talks about how we should show honor to these groups of people as well, right? So honoring the church. Like, why is this a problem? And do you feel like it's really different now compared to, like, I don't know, 20 years ago?
Oh,
30 years ago?
100%. I think when we think about figures that, especially in America, where we sort of revere this individual. I think, back in the day, the consensus sort of American pastor of the entire nation would have been Billy Graham, right? I don't think you could find many people to say anything bad about him. In fact, my Almaji in India, whenever she would pray for her grandkids, she'd always say, Lord, make them like Billy Graham. They really emphasize the gr. But
The H.
with Billy Graham, there was, again, like from presidents to just people in the pews, just packing out stadiums to hear Billy Graham speak. And even when he died, he later stayed in the Capitol Rotunda for a little bit. But today, we don't have figures like that anymore. Any pastor that you could think that's out there, there's sort of one contingent that would really follow them, and one contingent that would definitely find things against them. I think of John MacArthur, who passed away, just a couple months ago. And even with his passing, you see those sort of factions come out. And again, it goes across the board. There's just widespread skepticism of everyone. I don't know if you have a different take on that, or maybe could diagnose. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know why, and maybe it's because so many, especially in the Protestant realm, church leaders have fallen, and it's really public celebrity pastors, and then you get some of these big scandals. So then there's this distrust that builds up. But I think about other traditions and denominations, or like even Catholicism, we got the Pope, and like there's this reverence, right? And people flock to the Vatican, and there's just so much tradition there, but there's also this honor that's really visibly shown to people in authority. And I think we lose that. One of the things that I think about is I think about the Chicago Pope, Pope Leo. Somebody sent him a box of Aurelio's pizza. And it was just because he's from the South Side. So those of you who don't know, Aurelio's is a pizza chain. Somebody gave him, they flew the box over. I'm like, wow, that's mad respect. And he took it. And I think he actually ate it. I don't know if that's against the rules or not. I'm not Catholic.
The dude lives in Italy, the birthplace of pizza, and still would want a South Side slice. That's hilarious.
Yes. Yes, it's so hilarious. But I'm like, oh, what a nod to his roots. But I don't think we do that well enough anymore, right? Like, so I think part of the celebrity culture, the fall of church leaders have really
Mhm.
contributed to this. But is that okay? Is that an excuse for us to say, hey, you know what? Church is broken today in the new age. We don't have to respect church leaders. We don't have to respect the church. I mean, honestly, I see a lot on social media
Mhm.
where there's a ton of people who are like, oh, I love Jesus, but I don't love the church. I love
Mm.
Jesus. I'm a follower of Christ, but I don't really follow organized religion.
Yeah.
Even this like exvangelical movement, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of people just moving away from the church for like really good, legitimate reasons in those scenarios and maybe specific. But when you talk about it in a broad strokes, I think it's not great. And it seems like it's counterintuitive of what the Bible's telling us.
Well,
Right?
even when you're talking about social media, there's one side, like again, with the deconstruction, exvangelical, those sort of movements that occur. And then the other side is I feel like everyone's got a voice and an opinion, including us, right? I think
Yes.
we're part of the problem here. We're diluting the space of taking it from authoritative, honorable voices. There, again, part of the reason there isn't a consensus lead such as there was with Billy Graham is everyone's got a microphone now, and therefore we could say whatever we want to say. So who should we listen to? But maybe before even jumping into anything further, I wonder if there's a difference though between how the American church is at large and maybe the South Asian church within America. Some of the things I remember growing up, especially in the church that we went to, Joby's, some of the ideas that we have about, disagreeing with church leadership or maybe even speaking out against maybe a prophet or a pastor that comes into town. Some of those fear tactics, and some of them are legitimate, right? That would say like God will strike you down if you ever say anything against his
Yeah.
servant type ideas, right? Like it's going to be Elisha like a she bear. I think we're going to bring this up in more and more episodes, but man, like a bear will come maul you if you do something dishonorable
Yeah.
toward a pastor or prophet or some of the ideas that I grew up with. But I don't know if you agree or disagree with that. I wonder if
No, you know what? I think we put on our Instagram, one of those videos that kind of blew up where I was talking about my experience with a pastor and he was blatantly wrong about something. That story is pretty old. Like the thing about that is I've had that story and I think some of our friends, our mutual friends put it in the comments. They're like, "Oh, I was there." And I'm like, "Yeah, I was probably at your house, like the prayer meeting." The crazy thing, and the reason I bring it up is because like I've had that story in my like pocket for years, and I've told it anecdotally in friend groups, but like I've never put it on social media. One of the reasons why I was always afraid to put it on social media is because I feel like it would be dishonoring to a pastor, or people would just completely discredit Christianity and all these kind of things. That even happened in some of the comments, right? Like people are like, it's better to be atheist. And I think maybe there's a healthy fear of people not speaking out against blatant wrong. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that's the right path. There's a fear, right, of dishonoring somebody by critiquing or maybe even speaking out against someone.
Yeah, and you see almost the flip side of that, right? I don't know if it's honor per se, but maybe the fear that you're talking about where, at some spaces that you go to, you see this authoritative pastoral figure that essentially controls pretty much every aspect that goes on in a church with no sort of disagreement. And at the same time, you also see these pretty bad church splits that happen sometime from differences of opinion. Maybe it could be two very strong-headed individuals, but man, those just occur in such dishonorable ways
Yeah.
that, there's definitely one side of completely dishonoring the church, another side that's an unhealthy honor maybe of a church, and somewhere in between, you see the problems of
Yeah.
disunity and dishonor here.
Yeah, we could take it to extremes, right? Like people could disagree in an honorable way, and people can completely have a lack of respect to church leadership, even though they might be right, but they approach it in the wrong way. And I think that's why we want to have these types of conversations, because you might be living in a spot or in this tension at your church or wrestling with where should I go and I want to be part of a healthy church, and but you have this struggle with honoring people in those positions of leadership and
Mhm,
authority, right?
mhm.
And I think that's why we need to look at the scripture and like understand it and actually talk about it as two guys who have been part of multiple churches and led small groups and had tensions in lots of different places. But like, how do we actually navigate those spaces? But from a biblical perspective, Mr. Seminary grad, like, what does the Bible have to say? Not to put you on the spot, not like we haven't talked about this before or picked out a passage, but let's talk about the passage. I think that might actually shed some light on what honor is from a biblical perspective about the church.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be referencing First Thessalonians chapter 5, here where Paul is given some final instructions to the church before signing off, if you will.
Yep.
But here he's kind of specifically referencing eldership, pastorship, and others. So what it says in verses 12 and 13 of chapter 5, it says, "We ask you, brothers, to respect those who labor among you and are over you in the Lord and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves." So, Joby, I don't know if anything stands out to you off the bat here.
Yeah, it makes me think about the hard work. Like when I see that word labor among you and are over you and admonish you. That's a lot of if you think about all the scenarios of what that consists of. Man, the life of a pastor is so hard. The I think of the house visits, the really tough conversations, and the times where, man, I think about the moments even growing up as a kid when I was sick. Like how many times a pastor would be at my bedside.
Mm,
There's times when I remember this so clearly. Like my dad went in for heart surgery and my pastor came to visit at the hospital and everybody came to visit at the hospital. But when my pastor came, it was different. And he just like laid his hand on his head and he prayed for him. And even after saying amen, it was just like this moment of like silence and just like comfort. And it was so powerful, like no words said. And I think about all those things that people don't see, but they see oh, you preached something I didn't like, or you made a decision in the budget that I didn't like. And
yeah.
now I'm gonna dishonor you, right? And they don't think about the hard work and the labor that ministers do, and I think that gets lost, honestly, in the sight of a lot of people who disrespect or dishonor the church. But yeah, that really stood out to me. The word labor is such a heavy word, and I don't think
Yeah.
we give it enough weight, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And just like you said, they're laboring among you, and honor them because of their work. That's the only prerequisite that this verse
Yeah.
is saying. It's because of what they do. It's because of their job, their calling, that you are just required to honor them. Nothing else. I think one thing that stood out to me is this phrase "in the Lord," right? Labor
Mm.
among you and are over you in the Lord. So this "in the Lord" phrase, oddly enough, when we're thinking about it with parents and children, what does it say? Children, obey your parents in the Lord, right? So again, those who labor among you in the Lord. This concept of the power to do this may not be inherent to us. And the reason to do
Mhm.
this may not be inherent in the relationship, but it's inherent in the Lord. If we are in the Lord, this is a requirement, right? If we're in the Lord, we are called to honor our parents. If we're in the Lord, we are called to respect, to esteem those that are laboring over us. And it's not just a one to one relationship that's transactional between me and that other person. It's actually a triangle, right? There is in the Lord above us, and therefore those two sides of the triangle are connected to him. Therefore, that's the reason why that horizontal relationship has weight to it. That phrase just stood out to me as I was rereading it, and I immediately just thought about that with the parents and children, and that same phrase being used there.
Yeah, I mean, leave it up to Jeswin to bring math into the Bible, and so let's calculate the angles here of how to bestow honor
Oh
on
man, you don't
people.
want to hear my rapture date prediction. We'll do that in a different episode.
Right? Did we miss it? I think by the time we release this episode, maybe
That
no
dude
one's
didn't
here
carry
to
the one,
listen to
man.
it, right?
He didn't carry the one to divide the five.
Yes, exactly. Oh man, that's a whole nother episode. But I think it's really great points. I didn't really, correlate that obviously in the Lord and that age old verse that we probably learned as kids, but like understanding what does it really mean to be in the Lord. So yeah, like from a biblical foundation, it almost seems when we talk about the Ten Commandments and this command to honor your father and mother, and there's this command to bestow honor in places of authority. And it seems like there is this really significant instruction here from Paul and talking about this context about honoring our ministers. So why is it so hard? Like, are we just like missing this verse? Did we just skip over it? Or why is it so hard to practically apply some of these concepts?
Yeah, I mean, some of the reasons that people point to are definitely legitimate. I don't
Yeah.
disagree with some of the skepticism from, again, like in fact, when church leaders fall, we talk about that ad nauseum. They get highlighted ad nauseum as well, right? And so there's that skepticism because of that. Some of us have definitely experienced tensions within our local churches, left for various reasons, which are all legitimate. What's interesting to me is we know all the reasons to dishonor, but
Yeah.
because maybe we don't do a good job of honoring, I just wonder, right? If we went beyond Pastoral Appreciation Month and we started to highlight just all the great work our ministers are doing for our life and the life of our church, if we would just see numerous examples that just completely outpace and completely outnumber the failures that we see nowadays and we can point to, I wonder if that would be the case. I wonder if it's just a fact that we don't take the time to really acknowledge and admonish and highlight those individuals that do it week in and week out. Like you said, Joby, again, like you don't see those things, out there publicly all the time with the house visits, the laying on of hands, all these different things, but they're happening every single week by some
Yeah.
amazing men that are putting their life into this work. And so we definitely need to highlight that because I think, yeah, that's part of the reason why we feel like all the examples of the wrong are way more than the examples of the right.
Yeah. And I think the transactional nature of it, like when you talked about that, I think that's such a great biblical concept too, right? When we talk about honoring someone because like when they bestow honor on us, there's like this cycle, right? Like if, especially in brothers in Christ, like we honor each other and there's a transactional nature. So it's not just like a one-way street. I'm always showing you honor because you're in this position of authority over me, but there's a reciprocal nature of it too, right? And I think when we understand who God is and what he's done, it's easy to show honor to him because of who he is. But I
Mhm.
don't think we put the same weight on people because we don't understand who they are. Right. And that's kind of crazy to think about. It's like, do we understand who God is just because of the stories? And then we understand we have scripture to really talk about how amazing God is, but we don't know who our brother is. What if we took the time to actually
Mhm.
understand what our church leadership are doing behind the scenes? You'd probably have more of an appreciation and probably spend more time showing them honor and giving
Yeah.
them their just due, right? Because I think the only time we actually do this is at funerals, right? Like especially if a pastor passes away and you go to a funeral and you like, wow, look at all the amazing things. I went to a funeral. I went to a service a couple months ago, and like it was just for someone's amachi, and when they passed away, they did a really great job with the handout because they wrote a long story about their amachi. And it was so beautiful, like, and I was like blown away with how she served the Lord in India and all this kind. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. What if we took the time to do all of that here, like on earth, while people are alive, like to show appreciation? The power of that encouragement and ultimately that honor could go a long way and be reciprocal in nature, you know?
100%, 100 percent. And even as you were talking about showing honor, right? Like, oddly enough, when you were speaking about the Amici doing it long write up, it's like we shouldn't be doing living obituaries, but maybe we should, right? Maybe it is
Yeah,
a nice
sure.
thing to almost do to give them flowers for sure. And I was also going to say, one of the things, especially of a lot of church leadership that I found, most worthy of honor is when that leadership also honors their congregation in so many different ways, right? What are the most impactful moments that really shaped my life and even your life when we were growing up in Sunday school and doing PYPA things is when we got the encouragement, not just from anyone, but really from church leadership, right? When
Yeah.
someone that preaches for a living tells you that you have a gift of speaking, it hits in a totally different way, and I've received that affirmation from different people in my own life. And even, now with the seminary journey, some of the people in my life, my current pastor, as well as former pastors, all of them coming alongside of me and saying, hey, we actually see this gifting in you, meant more to me than anyone else saying it, because I look up to them so much. I esteem them so much. And I see these gifts in them when they affirm that calling in you and they honor you in that way. Man, it does something internally for yourself. It just almost like brings this joy about you. So for all those pastors out there that do a good job of honoring your congregants, it's invaluable. It could shape someone's life in such a massive way.
Yeah. Man, honoring your congregants and maybe even the people outside of your congregation, that might even go even further too, right? And that reminds me, man, of a story. When I was young and I grew up in a church and I made all my childhood friends, 7, 8, 9 years old, really pivotal moments in my life. But then we left because of church issues, right? I can't even understand all the church politicking things, but we left. But the thing was, they really had a popular VBS every summer.
Mm.
So for summer VBS, we would go back to that church to go to do VBS. And there was one time at the end, the final service, they brought all the kids in the sanctuary and shout out Pastor Steven because I'll never forget this. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And there was a prize that they were giving away. You answer a question, you get a prize. And then I think they were doing it for their church kids, but I won the prize and I'm not part of the church anymore. And when he saw that I won the prize, he told me to come up. He's like, "You'll always be a part of this church." And he like gave me this prize. He like opened it was like a trapper keeper, like one of those little silly folders that you put your notebook in. But I was like so happy. And he put his arm around me and it was my best friend's dad. And he had a great relationship with me. But like he put his arm around me and he said that. And I was like, wow, like the fact that he was able to like award me with something like something silly, right? But the fact that he even said that in front of everybody was just it meant the world to me. And it still resonates with me, right?
Yeah.
It's a man, I just love that, especially when it comes down from the top, like the recognition. Like we fundamentally as humans, we all have a need for that, right? And I think if it's done in the right way, it could spur you on to a lot of spiritual growth.
100%, 100%. And it's almost, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a South Asian thing. Maybe it's just a human thing in general. It's
Yep.
sometimes, when we think about, oh, what does the calling of God look like? Does it look like I'm sitting on the floor just waiting for an angel to appear to me? Sometimes, yes, it does. That's exactly what it looks like. And we see examples of that. But oftentimes it's through being around the word, you're feeling something internally, and then all of a sudden there's this external affirmation as well, right? That idea of don't be hasty in the laying on of hands by church leadership or eldership when they're kind of coming and calling this out into you. And there's something that, yeah, like you said, is sparked within you when church leadership does it well. And I think, there's a verse in First Timothy chapter 5 that says, hey, elders who do their job well, they're worthy of double honor, right? This idea of we are, again, from First Thessalonians, we're all called to honor people that are just in the vocation of ruling as an elder. But at the same time, those that do it well, they're worthy of almost double honor, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
glad that you gave double honor here to Pastor Stephen on this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of great memories. And I think it's in some ways, it might be easier for us because we had some good, healthy church experiences to say, hey, this is what honor looks like in the church. There's probably people listening to this, or if we talk about this or share some clips and people will be like, nope, I don't need that. Church hurt me way too much. I don't need to deal with that because I have my own individual personal relationship with God and I don't need to be a part of that church.
Hmm.
So when you hear that type of question and people wrestle with some of that stuff, and we're talking about practically honoring your church, how can somebody with that attitude, or maybe even those genuine hurtful experiences, practically show honor?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mhm.
That even that
Yeah.
idea of I can have my individual relationship with God and I don't
Yeah.
need to be part of a church is an interesting one. I think if we all took church hurts, me and you included, we would have probably left the church a long time ago if that was our
Yeah.
calling or our barometer of where to be. But one, you can't practically show honor by yourself. So there's already a conflict of concept right there. So
Expound on that though. Like you can't practically show honor by yourself. Like why
yeah,
can't you? Why can't you just all praise to Jesus in my bedroom by myself, right?
yeah, I mean, anytime that's true. But you can't show honor to one another. You can't honor the body without doing that. Now, can you honor the Lord without honoring his church? No, I don't think you can fully do that either. Again, if these verses are what we're called to do, but you say, I can just do this by myself, you can't actually live these verses out by yourself. Now, I will say this. I understand and I hear you, people who say I've been hurt by church leadership. I have too, right? Joby, you have too. We've all been hurt by church leadership, but one one concept I heard, and again, it's this idea of being hurt, right? I think being hurt just automatically shows us that there was an investment, right? We had an investment, we put our heart out there, we really cared about something. And whenever you care about something, you have to have the risk of you're going to be hurt. For example, in a marriage, right? Like between you and your spouse, if y'all are going to have hard, substantial conversations to grow, you have to risk getting hurt. If you need to say like a hard truth to your spouse or hear a hard truth from your spouse, that only comes at the risk of getting hurt. Now that's sort of one example, but you can
Yeah.
expound that concept toward the church and almost see it similarly. If you're going to care so much about the church, the body, and you want to have a hard, substantial conversation, or you're hurt by something that partnership did, yeah, I understand the pain. But at the same time, do you want to just not have that relationship altogether, right?
Yeah.
And almost just throw it away. What would that look like? Is that the better alternative, or
Yeah.
is it even an alternative that God is calling you toward? I don't see that in scripture.
It's a good thought. And I think as you said that, I was thinking, is it worth it to have this conversation? And you think about that question, like if you're having this dialogue, right? Like there's some battles you should fight, some battles, hey, I'm not going to die on this hill, right? But is it worth it to have this conversation? And I think that word worth might tie into this entire concept that we're talking about. We talk
Mhm.
about bestowing honor and esteem and this weight. Like, how much do I value the relationship? And I love the example that you bring up because if we think about the church as the bride of Christ and you dishonor the bride of Christ, what would that do to the groom, right? Like if you came to me and you dishonored my wife,
Mm, mhm,
how would I take that, right? And if we want to take bits and pieces of the Bible and hey, I really believe this part, but I'm going to throw away this part because this makes me really uncomfortable. We got to understand this concept of what like marriage is and like the bride of Christ and
mhm.
being joined with him and like we can get into all the theology, right? But then like we talk about like being buried with him, like think about the unity with him. And if I dishonor his bride, what does that say about my relationship with God himself, right?
Yeah, and
And
I mean, I think you brought this up on a previous episode. I can't recall when it was, but we're called to be part of this family of God that He has bought us with and brought us to. And what would it mean to be part of relating to a family if we say, "Hey, I'm just gonna show up, like, once a year," right? Like, Christmas and maybe, like,
Yeah.
Easter, we'll come those 2 times, and the rest of the time, we're checking out. I remember you brought that up, but again, like, that's completely dishonorable. It would be dishonorable to your regular family, so how much more to the family of God?
Yeah. No, and I think, man, and now it ties back to like, well, why should you honor your father and mother? Because like there's such a weight on familial relationships. And if family is so important and these dynamics are so critical, when I think about the church, how does that tie into the relationships? It is still part of a family if you really believe it. And I think that's where, yeah, people are going to wrestle with this and for good reason because, yeah, you probably legitimately got hurt. But maybe there's a different way. Maybe we need to think about practically how do we critique things without being dishonorable? Like there should be a way for us to voice our opinions, voice our disagreements without being dishonorable. And I think that's the problem right now, right? Especially when we talk about the world, that's a different story. Maybe they don't understand these biblical concepts. But when I see it from Christians, man, I see all the stuff like on social media about all like about everything recently, right? Like whether it's Charlie Kirk or now there's this revival and people are like equating things to Christian nationalism. It may be like general concepts that they're really worth having these conversations. But then there's this like toxic type of discussion where I feel like it's so dishonorable. Where I'm like, wait, as you as a Christian shouldn't really even be talking about it. I probably maybe even agree with some of your statements, but I can't get behind the way you talk about it.
Mhm.
And I think there's this disconnect about the way that we are treating each other, and it's so dishonorable. Like how
Yeah.
do we tackle the disagreements and honor?
Yeah, it's hard, social media is always just gonna highlight the
Yeah,
dishonor more than anything else. And honestly, I don't think social media is the right place to start publicly critiquing church leadership. I think we saw this too with a lot of people that said, "Oh, my church didn't address the Charlie Kirk situation. Therefore, I'm going to walk out and I need to find a new church now." Just in a very public way, right? But what does the Bible again tell us to do? There are ways we're called to have disagreements. Hey, if you had a question about this, like talk to your church elder, maybe bring it up, ask why it didn't occur this way. If you have a question about something that was ever said from the pulpit, regardless of this situation or not, like, why not go to them first? Why are you turning to social media and telling us about your church problems, right? That's a family thing. You don't just air out laundry to the entire world and then say, like, oh, I'm trying to honor God. It's like, no, you're not. You're just trying to get,
right.
clicks and likes and whatever else you want to try to get out of this. How do we do it in an honorable way? Just like, we just said there, it's you should have that conversation first. And that's a scary thing to do, and sometimes those conversations go south. But again, if you're going to have a substantial conversation with a significant partner within the church or even in like a marriage relationship, you have to risk those type of volatile situations and figure out how to do it in an emotionally stable way. I don't know if you've seen it done
Yeah.
in a way that's healthy. I've definitely seen it done in ways that are not as healthy. Hashtag general body meetings 2025. Let's keep them calm.
Yeah, I know. I think that's the challenging one, and maybe it's when we move out of the public square into the living room, and I think that's where I've seen more of a healthy conversation, because especially when you're in large groups of people, you can't have the nuanced opinions, and I think that's where I've seen problems that were public get wrestled down into more positive agreements and alignment but in smaller groups, right? And then when we say, hey, can I come over and talk to you about this? And I've had people come over to our house or church leadership and like we talk in our living room and guess what? The tenor is so different, right? The tone. It's like, wow, I didn't realize that we can have this type of dialogue about something that we disagree with. And we don't always leave with a resolution, but I'm like, wow, this is a better way to honor. And I think maybe there's like just anger management things that we just have to practically take into account. Hold your breath or like take 10 deep breaths and walk outside, take a walk, whatever it is. Because I feel like if you reset, your words will come out more honorable instead of just speaking things in the moment. But I think there are some really serious things. I don't want to discount the problems, right?
Mhm.
Because people who are feeling this way that they cannot honor the person who's in leadership because of blatant mistakes and dishonorable things that they really did and it's justified. Can we still go back to that? I think we've talked about this in other series about church hurt and all this stuff. And I don't want to talk about just like how do you leave a church? But like, can you restore honor in a place that was once broken? And when I think about that type of question, I think that's really hard to do, and it probably takes time, right? But I don't know. What's your take on it? Do you feel like in a place that really broke trust, sometimes the answer is to leave because of legitimate reasons. But if you were one of those people that stick around and try to fight through it, do you think you can get to a place of honoring that person or that leader, even when they once broke your trust?
Yeah, I think you can. And I think we have seen examples of this done even in churches that we have been part of. We have seen church leaders fall and the church end up embracing them and restoring them back to where they were. Now it depends on, the sin and whatnot, but at the same time, I've seen that done practically and visibly. And we hear examples of it all the time. I think right now, whenever you see church discipline being handle, there's always a skepticism of like, well, just kick them out completely. But you see good examples of people like, I don't know, like Matt Chandler, right? Like there was something brought up by eldership. He was removed for a season. He was restored. I think that's the biblical correct cycle. And the people that stuck around afterwards, right? Like this is still that individual's calling. So you have to, in the Lord, find a way to respect that. Same thing with people like Tony Evans, right? Like another individual, again, it's similar cycle. But I think it's been a good thing. I think of even other examples such as Harvest, which is a big church network out here in Chicago. Their church eldership took a very hard decision to remove their senior pastor in James McDonald. And, he was eventually let go of and elsewhere. But at the same time, the church is still going and existing. And I would commend, again, that eldership group for functioning as elders. And if you're part of that church, I think that's a great, healthy place to be. So, I guess these are numerous examples of that actually being done in great ways.
Yeah. And I think there's probably ways in our own culture that we've honored our pastors. And there might be mistakes and issues and disagreements, but I do like the way, and sometimes it is challenging, right? Like I've seen this growing up that we've been able to honor. And I think practical ways that maybe have come to shown that they were true acts of honor, even though I got frustrated with them when I was younger. For example, weddings. Like there'd be these really long weddings, and it would just be like, wow, we've got pastor after pastor after pastor speaking. And like I think about conventions and like, hey, we got to give this person time. Then I grew to realize, like, wow, there is this level of honor that they're bestowing. And maybe logistically it doesn't always work out well. But the reason why your convention is 80 speakers long and it's 3 hours, it's because we're trying to show honor. And maybe that's the fundamental reason. It's not because I think we can digest 4 different sermons in one night, right? And it's going to stick. But it's this concept of honor. And I think that's probably some ways that our culture has shown it. I don't know if you've seen that growing up in Brown Church. It's interesting to see how honor is bestowed.
100%. I mean, when we're gonna go to PCNAC next year in Chicago, right? Like, if you have multiple sermons on the English night, like you said, definitely a show of honor. At the same time, I can only digest one sermon tonight, so please let's just honor the word and give someone a proper amount of time to complete a
Yeah,
great thought. On the flip side, another thing we always see this, right? You'll always go to a prayer meeting, and there's that old upton pastor somewhere, and no matter who is speaking that night, this individual is going to get the benediction, and I love
yeah.
it, man. Like always giving that place of honor to that oldest person so that they can say, "Bidavam David Nehum," and so on and so forth. And that's something I'm gonna miss, man. Like when our parents' generation goes, someone has to memorize the benediction because I need it to be said at every single
Dude,
prayer that we do.
just do it at the end of this podcast. Like every episode, we're just gonna record you and play it at the end. But like, and speaking of which, I mean, like thinking about the vote of thanks. That laundry list of every time at the end of a convention, it's like, oh, I want to thank this ballroom for hosting us, or the high school, Oak Forest High School. Thank you for hosting in the gymnasium. But like the vote of thanks is like, and this is a way that we need to bestow honor. My favorite though is the visiting pastors that would come to church. And this is the best way of honor I've ever seen is the subtle handshake, but then in the hand is the check. And it's like you don't even know. And that's the best way to do it. That's
Oh
like
man,
even there's double honor in there. You don't even know, right? Like you don't even know.
that's
But
so good.
that's how we've done it, right?
We got to bring
But
that back, man. When I'm gonna honor someone, just slide them a check in the handshake, just dap them up,
how
and
do you do that with like Venmo? Like, hey, I'm gonna Venmo you, like subtly. Like, how do you do that?
oh, that's good. No, that's definitely great
Yeah.
examples.
I think it's stuff that we probably didn't realize our parents were doing, or our uncles were doing, and the churches that we grew up in. But like, there's like practical ways that people have been honoring each other, and I think we need to get back to that, right? Because they fundamentally see the value in another person. They understand the work and the labor that they're doing, and maybe when people truly mess up, it's because we don't understand their worth, right? And we don't understand their value, and that's really what honoring is from a biblical standpoint. It is showing the weight and providing that value and respecting that and honoring it. I think that's the way to do it, is to see and esteem that worth to someone, right? Yeah, so hopefully this is helping in terms of, if you're having issues at church, like you have fundamental disagreements, especially in the church world, it's really easy to just butt heads, but like take the time to understand who that person is, because we're not only commanded to do it, but it shows us how we are honoring God through the way that we honor each other, right? So
Yeah,
love this series, Jeswin. I think we're gonna hit on some new ones in this series when we talk about government and authority. I'm sure we'll get some questions on that one.
yeah, that's gonna be the toughest one. But again, it starts in the smallest circle, which is within the home. Now we're getting into church, and yeah, if it's in those two places, then we can definitely get to the government. We're gonna make this
Yep.
happen.
Yes, yes. Don't cancel us. So don't dishonor us. Thank you guys for continuing to listen. Please send us your questions. Continue to subscribe. And we'll look forward to continuing talking to you on the next episode.